The following has been brought to you by RockSolidFanClub.ca.
Let's talk a little bit of UFC 305 coming up.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, Brady, I don't know if you go back. You remember we did a little talkie too about this a gentleman by the name of Sean Strickland.
Who's relevant to this event because he is the number one contender. He's going to be facing the winner of the main event this weekend.
Absolutely. Rightfully so as well. Hell of a talent inside of that cage. Hell of a talent.
Love
but
Sean.
a lot of people have said, whoa, the things he says on the outside are a little wacky, a little silly, if you will, right? So if you think about it, maybe Sean had to do a little bit of damage control. And it seems like, I don't know. Do you think that that's what he did recently? Because he did put up this, I'm pointing right now, this tweet right here.
I'm going to read it. I'm going to read the tweet. So he did. Now, this was after his, we'll talk about what he was doing in between this, but this tweet at the end of all of his rants, it was the exact same day that we put out our video here on YouTube, a day after we put it out on podcast form. And this was the tweet that was put out. I tweet for the love of the game, not the money, but hate equals engagement. Those Democrats, this is quotations, those Democrats really are ruining this country versus, quotations, these dirty fucking commie freedom-hating fucks. They try to censor us, turn your kids gay, tax you to pay for illegals. What tweet do you think trends? End of tweet.
That, in my opinion, is a little bit of a damage control tweet. And it's a little bit of pulling back of the curtain, if you will, on Sean Strickland. And might I say, the genius that is Sean Strickland, because he understands the game, ladies and gentlemen. He understands the things that he says. Nobody's just like, Sean, Sean's talking about. No, people listen. And he understands that he has people's ear, right? So what's going to get him more engagement? He's absolutely right.
Well, okay,
on this.
Before this tweet, no, you're right. But there is some actual real stuff that's filtering out through his socials as well. He firmly believes a man called Tiki, who is a former UFC fighter. Me and you are very familiar with Tiki's career because we've been watching this since day one.
Yep.
Tiki had a bit of a run in the mid-2000s. He was just around for a minute, getting thrown around and knocked out. But he had a run in the UFC and then MMA. And he became a manager and became a backstage hand and things like that. And now he's one of the most successful managers. He's Aljamain's manager and a few other people. And someone had reached out to Sean and said, hey, I think you need a team. You're doing this all on your own. I think you need a team. And maybe you should hook up with Tiki here. And Sean put out a video and a couple tweets basically saying I wouldn't work with him because he's a predator. So there was a bit of backlash that came from that. But in the midst of that, Sean said he was even more upset that no media was talking about that tweet. They were talking about all of his Olympic tweets and everything else he was putting out, but they wouldn't talk about that. So he was Googling his name every day as he was tweeting this all day long, trying to see stuff that was related to his name and searching hashtags and such. Correct me if I'm wrong. I may be wrong. And Sean, if this is true, let me know. I think Sean watched our video or heard our audio somewhere on one of these multiple platforms, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I think that was Sean may have heard it. Or it's a giant coincidence and me and you were right. I don't know.
Either way, let me formally introduce myself, Sean. My name is Chris. That is Brady over there. Come talk to us on the show.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm a lot bigger in person than I look, Sean. I'm not one of those little vanilla midgets.
That's not true at all. He rides on my shoulder. Anyways, so Sean Strickland being relevant is actually more true than you think, Brady, because we're talking UFC 305. You're picturing yourself riding on my shoulder, right?
I seen it. I fucking seen it. And you know what? If it was true, I wouldn't even disbelieve it. You're a fucking giant.
Anyways, UFC 305 main event.
Yeah.
It's been coming, right? Izzy, DDP couldn't ask for like a better buildup, could you?
First presser was shit. This presser that just happened yesterday as we're recording this.
Mhm.
Holy moly. There was dogs mentioned. There was families mentioned. There was countries mentioned. There was rights mentioned. A little bit of everything was mentioned.
Yeah, there was privilege mentioned, seemed to be the underlying tone of all of this. Now, a lot has been said about DDP being able to get into somebody's head, and everybody's like, psychological warfare on a microphone. Let me show you what that's all about. Right? These are his exact words. And he's come out and he's managed. Listen, he broke down Strickland. He's broken down Izzy on this. Do you think, let me ask you this, do you think that Israel Adesanya is going into this with far too much emotion involved? And is that going to be a good thing or is that going to be a bad thing? Because there's a lot of pressure, there's no doubt about it, on Izzy for this, right? But what do you think?
Normally, I think emotions are the worst thing that you could take into a fight. Izzy having 100 fights, over 100 fights inside of all different realms in combat sports.
Mhm.
And we've seen Izzy perform under stress and being angry. And in my opinion, that's the best Izzy. We see a fucking dude that puts on artwork. When he's pissed off, look how pissed off he was with Alex. He was mad the first time because Alex was stepping in his territory and all this stuff, and he knew why Alex was there. But when Alex beat him and he came in the second time, he was fucking pissed the whole walkout. He was pissed the whole. You could feel it. Even that's when Sean Strickland started getting in his head. Was around that time, right? Like it was really. Izzy performs very well. Here's the thing about DDP. I think he's a charisma kryptonite. I think if you have charisma, he has a way of destroying it and breaking it down with you. That guy is I think he's a lot smarter than people give him credit for. I don't know if people are discrediting his intelligence, but I do think he's a lot smarter than I was giving him credit for because of the way he fights. He fights with no regard. But DDP is going in there this weekend. The odds are starting to change. I looked at the odds yesterday. I looked at them today. They're pretty even.
They're pretty even. And do you think that had something to do with the breakdown that Izzy had during the presser? Do you think that making it that emotional makes it, that much more? Here's my second question that I wonder about, and I'd love to hear what everybody else thinks about this, because we talk about pressure, right? We talk about pressure. And you think to yourself, not just the pressure of Izzy being Izzy and having to come back and get his belt. There's pressure there. There's no doubt about it. But we've also heard already from the UFC that they are interested and they will be going to Africa next year.
And that's something that you've been big on since they announced this fight. You think the rematch is already booked?
I think the rematch is already booked no matter what happens. I think that just with this and the emotion and everything, can you imagine Izzy wins, which is what everybody is hoping for, or even if DDP wins, I think that if it's, close enough, I think that you definitely see that. And I think that Izzy knows this. I think that Izzy thinks that he's already the A side because Francis Ngannou is gone from the UFC. I think Izzy thinks that he's the A side on doing any show in Africa. And he's very big. He's very big on like tradition and like, being firsts and all of that. So, I mean, you have to know that Izzy's like, no, I absolutely have to be on that UFC Africa card.
And I agree with you. I think both of those guys would want to be on that card. But if we were going to paint this thing in, like the interns call it, in a segment and put it in a box, let's go back to the beginning of the segment. Where does that leave Sean Strickland?
Well, Sean Strickland is still going to be sitting. I don't think that Sean, unless one of these guys gets absolutely starched in the first round, I think Sean Strickland is going to find himself having to take another fight.
Poor fucking Sean.
That's going to happen. You know what I mean? Who that person is, I don't know. I don't know. But I mean, there's definitely, there's
the rematch
out there.
The rematch with DDP with Sean and the rematch with Izzy with Sean are two fights that we both want to see and everybody else wants to see as well. Like this is the love triangle here, right?
You know what else I would do? You know what else I would even be interested in doing? Sean, hey, How about you stop training so hard, maybe put on a couple of pounds and do that rematch with Poetan?
I think it's time to pay some bills. I don't really like that.